On our 5th wedding anniversary, I sat across the table from the very people whose lives I had quietly been holding together for years, while they laughed about how lucky I was to have married their successful daughter. They called me polite, dependable, even kind, but never capable, never influential, never the man who had been paying their medical bills, funding their boutique, and keeping Jamal in college since day one. What they didn't know was that every sponsorship they praised Danielle for, every financial miracle they credited to her powerful network, had come directly from me, hidden behind a promise I made out of love, not pride. That night, their words felt harmless on the surface, jokes, compliments, casual comparisons, but underneath, they slowly built a narrative that erased my role completely. Danielle tried to stop them. She warned them. She begged them to drop it. They didn't listen. Because how could they imagine that the quiet man they underestimated was the silent foundation beneath their stability? This is the story of patience mistaken for weakness, generosity mistaken for luck, and the moment truth finally stepped into the room. Uninvited, undeniable, and powerful enough to rewrite everything they thought they knew about me. Please take some time and like this video. Also subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. We will be excited to have you join our community. My 5th wedding anniversary unfolded like a stage play no one warned me I was starring in. Danielle squeezed my hand under the table as her parents arrived, smiling in that tight way she only used when she already sensed emotional turbulence forming on the horizon. "Mom, Dad, Jamal, thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice layered with both warmth and caution. Her father, Leonard Carter, looked around the restaurant with measured approval before settling into his chair. "Nice place," he said. "You picked this, Danielle?" Danielle opened her mouth, but her mother answered first. "Well, of course she did. She's always had an eye for quality," Evelyn Carter said, glancing at me briefly, the way one looks at a polite stranger who just happens to be present. Jamal leaned back in his seat, grinning. "Yeah, sis always chooses the upscale stuff. Bill, you finally letting her plan things now." I smiled mildly. Danielle has always been good at planning. I just enjoy showing up on time. They laughed, too quickly, too easily, and Danielle's fingers tightened around mine again. Menus were opened, compliments exchanged, wine poured, but beneath every sentence, there lingered something faintly abrasive, like conversation dressed as courtesy, yet sharpened by comparison. Leonard cleared his throat midway through appetizers. "You know, Danielle," he began, folding his napkin with deliberate care. "We were just talking last week about how far you've come. Connections, influence, stability. You really transformed the family situation." Danielle blinked slowly. "Dad, it wasn't just me. But you opened doors," Evelyn insisted. "Those sponsorship programs, the tuition coverage for Jamal, the help with the boutique refinancing, that all came through your network, didn't it?" I lifted my glass to take a quiet sip, though the wine suddenly tasted thinner than before. Danielle shook her head gently. "Mom, please, it wasn't exactly like that." Jamal chuckled, shaking his head in admiration. "Sis, just own it. You basically carried the whole family. Honestly, Bill got lucky marrying someone with that kind of reach." The laughter that followed felt louder than necessary, as if they were reassuring themselves of a narrative they had repeated so often it now felt factual. Danielle leaned forward urgently. "Jamal, stop. You're exaggerating." Leonard waved a dismissive hand. "No exaggeration, sweetheart. We've watched things change. We've watched opportunities appear. And Bill," he paused, studying me with a curious tilt of his head, "you're a good man. Polite. Responsible. But let's be honest, Danielle's influence is what really elevated this family." Danielle's chair shifted slightly. "Dad, please don't do this tonight." I set my glass down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the tablecloth, as if precision could stabilize the room. "Mr. Carter," I said calmly, "Danielle has always supported her family with a full heart. That's something I deeply respect." Evelyn nodded approvingly. Exactly. She's always been the strong one. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, there was an urgency there that only I seemed to recognize. "Mom," she whispered, "please just enjoy dinner." But Leonard leaned back, folding his arms with an air of thoughtful authority. "You know what it is? In this city, success has a presence. You can see it, feel it." Danielle walks into a room, and doors open. "Bill," he shrugged lightly. "You're steady, dependable, just not exactly commanding, you know?" Silence fell, not abrupt, but heavy, deliberate, stretching like a drawn-out cord that refused to resolve. Danielle's voice trembled. "Dad, stop, please." They didn't, and I did not interrupt them. 3 years earlier, our Brooklyn apartment had been quiet, except for the hum of late-night traffic and the sound of Danielle pacing the living room, her phone clutched in her hand as if it contained the weight of her entire family's future. "They're struggling again," she said, stopping in front of me. "The boutique loan is collapsing, Jamal's tuition is overdue, and Mom refuses to say it outright, but I can hear the panic in her voice." I listened carefully, letting her words settle before responding. "What's going to happen now?" I asked her gently, while maintaining a strong gaze on her. Danielle, appearing and looking very confused, couldn't possibly place her hand on anything. "Honestly, Bill," she said to me, "I do not know what to do or how to fix this. I am out of options. It would be bad if Jamal drops out of college. He has constantly failed to secure government scholarship for his studies. My dad is on routine medical care and medications and needs good finance to keep him running. Mom's case is equally same as Dad. How on earth are they going to pull through this?" she asked, with eyes appearing reddish and inflamed. I saw Danielle, a woman that has given me joy, right from the day I met her on that cold evening in a Queens suburb, appearing scattered and extremely overwhelmed. "I can help," I said. She stopped pacing. "Bill, we've talked about this. I don't want them thinking you're responsible for everything. They'll feel indebted. I don't want their gratitude," I replied softly. "I want their stability." She studied my face, searching for hesitation and finding none. "What exactly do you mean by help?" she asked cautiously. "I can route support through one of the philanthropic arms we work with," I explained. "It will look institutional, structured, legitimate. They'll believe it's a charitable sponsorship aligned with your nonprofit connections." Danielle's eyes widened slightly. "You do that for them?" "For you," I corrected gently. She sat beside me, her voice lowering. "But they'll think it came from me." I nodded once. "Yes, and that's why I need you to promise something." Her brow furrowed. "What promise?" "That you won't tell them it was me. Not ever. Not unless there is no other choice." She stared at me, startled. "Bill, why would you want to stay invisible?" "Because love shouldn't be transactional," I said quietly. "And generosity shouldn't demand recognition to feel valid." She hesitated for a long moment, then whispered, "Okay, I'll protect your secret." Neither of us realized then how heavy that promise would eventually become. The first year after the sponsorship began, the Carters spoke with gratitude. They called Danielle almost weekly, thanking her for leveraging her influence to secure what they believed was a competitive charitable placement. "Your connections saved us," Evelyn would say often. "We're so proud of the woman you've become." Danielle would respond carefully, her words always measured. "I'm just glad things are stabilizing." From across the room, I would watch her, seeing the small flicker of conflict behind her smile, the silent knowledge she carried alone. But gratitude is a delicate emotion. It erodes quietly when comfort becomes routine. By the second year, the tone shifted. Leonard began saying things like, "Danielle's network really came through again," whenever another funding renewal arrived. Jamal, now comfortably enrolled at a private university whose invoices I personally approved, started joking casually. "Guess it helps having a sister who moves in big circles." One evening at their home, Evelyn laughed while serving dinner. "Our daughter is basically our guardian angel. Without her influence, we'd still be drowning." Danielle forced a smile, glancing at me briefly. I simply said, "She's always cared deeply about family." The sentence satisfied them, and the narrative grew stronger. They never once wondered why a charitable organization would remain so consistently generous year after year without public acknowledgement. And Danielle never broke her promise. Comfort matured into confidence, and confidence slowly sharpened into quiet arrogance. One afternoon, Leonard visited our apartment unannounced, watching me work on my laptop at the dining table. "You're always busy," he observed. "But I never quite understand what you actually do, Bill. I don't seem to see you making the news with big wins and big projects. It looks like you have become redundant and stuck in one place." "I manage investment structures," I replied calmly. "And that wouldn't need me making big news." He nodded slowly. "Sounds important. But you're not exactly visible, you know? No big promotions, no flashy milestones." Meanwhile, Danielle's influence keeps expanding. I smiled and said gently, "Things aren't always the way people perceive them. My kind of job doesn't need me to make a lot of noise." Danielle's head snapped up. "Dad, his work is significant. He just doesn't advertise it." Leonard smiled indulgently. "I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, in New York, success usually makes noise." "Bill is quiet," Jamal added from the couch. "Yeah, bro moves like a low-key consultant while sis is out here securing life-changing deals." Danielle stood abruptly. "That's not funny, Jamal." I closed my laptop gently. "It's fine," I said. "Not everything meaningful needs to be public." They accepted that explanation as evidence of modesty rather than strength. And each time I allowed the misunderstanding to continue, their certainty about my ordinariness deepened. On that anniversary day, as we continued our celebration with so much food and wine to drink, I sensed from how they had begun that the evening might just turn into a scene where I would be constantly battered by Danielle's family. Jamal leaned forward, grinning mischievously. "You know, Bill, if sis hadn't connected the family to those sponsors, I'd probably be out of college right now." Danielle whispered sharply, "Jamal, enough." But Leonard chuckled. "He's not wrong. Danielle's network changed everything for us. It takes real influence to make organizations invest in a family long-term." Jamal laughed gently, saying, "Dad, I think it pays to be a man whose connections can come through at difficult times. Sis has proven that already." Danielle was becoming furious about the way they were letting those words out carelessly. Evelyn nodded. "And it takes sacrifice. Danielle always gives more than she receives." The implication hovered in the air, unspoken yet unmistakable. Danielle's voice trembled. "You're misunderstanding how things happened." Leonard frowned slightly. "Then clarify. Because from where we stand, our daughter opened doors that Bill's career never could." The words landed with clinical precision, not shouted, not dramatic, just carefully arranged to sound factual. Danielle looked at me, panic filling her eyes. I remained calm. "Mr. Carter," I said quietly, "perception often depends on what details people are given." He leaned forward, intrigued. "So what details are we missing?" Danielle shook her head urgently. "None. Please, let's just change the subject." But Evelyn sighed. "Sweetheart, you're too kind to admit it, but you've carried this family for years. We're grateful. Bill is fortunate to have you." I felt Danielle's hand trembling now, not squeezing mine but gripping it, as if she feared the moment might collapse into something irreversible. She excused herself abruptly and motioned for her parents and Jamal to follow her toward the hallway near the restrooms. From the table, I could see her speaking intensely, her voice low yet urgent. "Please stop," she whispered, almost pleading. "You don't understand what you're saying." Leonard frowned. "What are we saying that's untrue?" "You're misjudging Bill," she insisted. "You're misjudging our life. Just trust me and drop it." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Why are you defending him so desperately? We're simply acknowledging your role in helping us." Danielle's eyes filled with tears. "Because you're wrong. And because he asked me never to explain certain things." Jamal blinked. "What things?" She hesitated, the promise pressing heavily against her conscience. I can't tell you." But please, just stop the jokes. They're not harmless. Leonard shook his head gently. You're protecting his pride, Danielle. That's admirable. But honesty matters too. No matter how you try hard to protect Bill's pride, we understand what is happening and wouldn't fall for such cheaply desired image laundry. Jamal looked at Danielle and said, Sis, we understand your concern. But your husband has to accept the fact that you run this show. I don't see anything wrong with us saying things the way they are. I strongly feel you deserve all the praise Dad and Mom have showered on you. At this point, it was becoming tensed as Danielle's shoulders slumped. She knew they wouldn't listen, not because they were cruel, but because they were convinced their understanding was accurate. As she returned to the table, a fragile silence wrapped around her like armor. She gazed at me, and with every gaze, Danielle's eyes beckoned for the approval to state everything clearly to her parents and Jamal the way they are. But she knows she had already promised me she was going to keep our little secret away from them. Dinner resumed, though the mood had shifted irreversibly, like a glass that had cracked without shattering, still intact on the table, still functional, but forever altered in the way it held light. Leonard Carter cleared his throat once more, slower this time, as though preparing to enter a conversation he believed he fully understood, even though he was standing at the edge of truths he had never once considered. Bill, he began, leaning forward with a measured seriousness that carried the weight of paternal authority. Let me ask plainly. Do you ever feel pressure knowing your wife's influence has been the driving force behind this family's financial recovery? Danielle inhaled sharply, the sound slicing through the air before she could stop herself. Dad, she exclaimed, her voice laced with a mixture of embarrassment and warning, her eyes flicking toward me with an urgency that said more than any spoken defense could. Pressure, I said slowly, placing my fork down with quiet precision, is an interesting concept. I feel responsibility. That's different. Leonard nodded thoughtfully. Responsibility is good, he said, folding his hands together on the table, his tone turning almost instructive. But visible achievement matters too. Influence, reach, authority, those things define leadership in this city. You know how New York works. If people can't see what you do, they assume you're not doing much at all. Success, I replied, my voice even, doesn't always introduce itself loudly, Mr. Carter. That sounds philosophical, he said lightly, leaning back in his chair. There's no shame in acknowledging reality, he added. Danielle stepped up when we needed someone strong, someone resourceful. That kind of leadership deserves recognition. I leaned back slightly in my chair, folding my hands together loosely, allowing a thoughtful silence to stretch just long enough to settle over the table before I spoke again. Recognition, I said, is a delicate thing. When it arrives too loudly, it often overshadows the quieter efforts that made it possible in the first place. Evelyn tilted her head. Are you saying Danielle didn't do those things? I shook my head gently. Not at all. I'm saying leadership is rarely a solo act. It's usually a network of unseen contributions, quiet negotiations, and influences that operate behind the scenes. Leonard picked up his glass again, swirling the liquid slowly as though contemplating my earlier words. You're a thoughtful man, Bill, he said finally. I'll give you that. But this city rewards visibility. It respects presence. Quiet contributions are admirable, but they rarely change how people measure influence. I smiled faintly, not out of agreement, but out of recognition that his worldview, while limited, was not malicious. It was simply built on the visible structures of power he had observed all his life. Perhaps, I said softly, but sometimes the most decisive moves in this city happen in rooms that never make headlines, through conversations that are never announced, by people whose names are never mentioned publicly. Jamal chuckled lightly. Sounds like spy talk. Danielle shot him a look so sharp it finally silenced him. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice gentler now. Bill, you're a good man. No one is denying that. You've been supportive, steady, reliable. But you have to admit, Danielle's influence is what changed our situation. She's the one who stepped into rooms and made things happen. I held her gaze kindly. Support and influence aren't opposites, Mrs. Carter. Sometimes they're intertwined so tightly that separating them becomes impossible. Leonard set his glass down with a soft clink. Well, he said, concluding the conversation with a tone that suggested finality. Either way, we're grateful for how things turned out. Danielle did what needed to be done, and we're all better for it. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, the movement so subtle that only I noticed. She opened them again and forced a small smile, but the strain behind it was unmistakable. Inside, however, something settled within me. Not anger, not humiliation, but a clear awareness that silence, while noble, can eventually distort truth so deeply that it begins to resemble weakness. And weakness invites disrespect, even from those you care for. As we left that evening for our home, the drive home unfolded in a silence so dense it seemed to occupy physical space between us. A silence that pressed against the windows, against the dashboard, against the steady rhythm of the tires gliding over the asphalt, as though even the road sensed that something long deferred had finally reached its threshold. Danielle did not speak at first. She kept her gaze forward, fingers interlocked tightly on her lap, her shoulders rising and falling in controlled, measured breaths that betrayed the storm she was refusing to let loose too quickly. I knew that posture. It was the posture she assumed when she had already made a decision but was still rehearsing how to announce it. When we pulled into the driveway and the engine stilled, she did not unbuckle her seatbelt immediately. Instead, she turned slowly toward me, her eyes bright not with tears but with a quiet resolve that carried more weight than any outburst ever could. "Bill," she began softly, yet with an unmistakable firmness, "I can't do this anymore." I leaned back slightly, studying her expression. "Do what anymore?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely as if the word itself could encompass months of subtle insults, dismissive laughter, and carefully disguised condescension. The constant disrespect, the assumptions, the way they talk to you like you're temporary. I exhaled slowly. "Danielle, they don't know the full picture. And that's by design." She shook her head, a small but decisive motion. "But the design is hurting you. And it's hurting me. Every dinner, every call, every passing remark. I feel like I'm complicit in a lie that makes the man I love look smaller than he is." Her voice did not break, but it softened, and that softness pierced deeper than anger ever could. "I don't need them to worship you," she continued, "but I need them to respect you. And they can't respect what they don't understand." I looked down briefly at my hands, then back at her. "We agreed, Danielle. Quiet help, no recognition, no expectations. That arrangement protected their dignity. It also erased your sacrifice," she replied immediately. "And tonight proved something to me, Bill. Silence doesn't always look noble from the outside. Sometimes it just looks like weakness." The word lingered between us, not as an accusation, but as an uncomfortable truth neither of us had wanted to examine too closely until now. "I was going to tell them," she added, her voice steady now. "Tonight. Right there at the table." My head lifted sharply. "No, absolutely not. Bill, no," I repeated more firmly. "Your father's pride is fragile. If he learns everything at once, it won't feel like gratitude. It will feel like humiliation." She leaned closer, her eyes searching mine with quiet urgency. "And what about your pride? Does that not matter? Or are you planning to keep carrying this burden alone indefinitely, just so they can continue believing I'm the one holding everything together?" "That belief keeps their confidence intact," I replied. "It gives them dignity. It gives them illusion," she countered. "And illusions eventually collapse. When they do, the fall is harder." I opened my mouth to respond, but she placed her hand gently over mine, her touch warm, grounding, persuasive in a way that words alone could never achieve. "Bill," she said softly, "I love you, and I'm grateful beyond what I've ever been able to express. But I cannot keep watching the man who saved my family be treated like he's just an accessory to my life. That is not fairness. That is distortion. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of her words settle where logic alone had failed to reach. They need to know, she insisted. Not for revenge. Not for pride. For truth. Silence followed again, but this time it was not suffocating. It was contemplative. Gradually, I realized that what I had called patience might indeed have begun to resemble surrender, and surrender, however dignified, was still a relinquishing of rightful acknowledgement. Finally, I exhaled and nodded slowly. If you truly believe it's time, I said quietly, then tell them. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised that my resistance had dissolved so quickly once confronted by her unwavering persistence. Really? She asked, almost cautiously. Yes, I replied. But do it gently. Let the truth arrive with dignity, not drama. She nodded, relief washing over her features, but then something else replaced it. Curiosity, deep and sudden. Bill, she said hesitantly, before I tell them, there's something I need to understand first. I tilted my head. What is it? All this time, she continued slowly. I thought you were using your connections to secure grants and sponsorships for them. That's what you told me. That you were pulling strings quietly. I remained silent. Her brows furrowed as realization began assembling itself piece by piece behind her eyes. You weren't just arranging funding, were you? She whispered. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I reached into the glove compartment, retrieved a slim folder, and handed it to her. Open it, I said gently. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the documents. Her eyes moved across approval letters, transfer confirmations, authorization signatures, all bearing my name in places she had never thought to look before. She looked up slowly, disbelief and astonishment blending into one. Bill, you mean you were the funding? I nodded once. For a long moment, she simply stared at me, speechless. Then her hand moved instinctively to her mouth as emotion finally breached her composure. All of it, she asked faintly. All of it, I confirmed quietly. From the first medical bill to Jamal's tuition to the monthly allowances. There were no external grants. No charitable foundations. Just me. Her eyes filled, not with guilt, but with overwhelming gratitude that struggled to find adequate expression. You carried this alone, she murmured, voice trembling now. And you never even hinted at it. I promised you I would take care of them, I said simply. And promises don't need applause to remain valid. She leaned forward suddenly and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tightly as if attempting to compensate, in one embrace, for every moment she had unknowingly allowed my contributions to remain invisible. Thank you, she whispered repeatedly. Thank you for loving them. Thank you for loving me enough to do all this quietly. 2 days later, the revelation that had lived only between us was forced into motion by circumstance rather than design. My phone remained silent that morning, but Danielle's rang repeatedly until she finally answered on the third call. I watched her expression shift as Leonard's voice filtered through the speaker. Danielle, he said, sounding unusually tense. We haven't received the funding for this month. Did something go wrong with the organization? In the background, Evelyn's voice could be heard faintly, urging urgency. Tell her to fix it quickly. Your appointment is next week, Leonard. And Jamal's anxious tone layered on top of that. Sis, they can't delay this now. The hospital already sent reminders. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, then inhaled deeply as though bracing herself for the irreversible moment. Dad, she said calmly, this month, you should call Bill. There was a short pause. Then Leonard laughed, amused and dismissive. Call Bill. Danielle, don't be ridiculous. You're the one who handles these things. You've always been our benefactor. She swallowed once, then spoke with deliberate clarity. No, Dad. I'm not. The background murmuring grew louder, confused. What do you mean? Evelyn asked sharply. Danielle's voice steadied. The funding you've been receiving, the tuition payments, the medical bills, the monthly support, it wasn't from any organization. And it wasn't from me either. Silence. Then Leonard spoke again, slower this time. Danielle, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying, she continued carefully, that Bill has been the one providing everything. From the very beginning. A scoff escaped Jamal in the background. She's just trying to defend him again. Evelyn added skeptically. Danielle, sweetheart, there's no need to exaggerate to protect your husband's feelings. Danielle did not raise her voice. Instead, she opened the folder on the table, snapped clear photos of the approval letters and transfer records, and forwarded them instantly. Check your messages, she said quietly. Several seconds passed. Then the faint sound of a phone unlocking. Another pause. And then silence, so complete it seemed to drain the air from the call. Leonard's voice, when it returned, was no longer amused. This can't be accurate, he murmured. These approvals, they're all signed by him. Evelyn's tone shifted from skepticism to stunned disbelief. All these years, Bill was the one. Jamal's voice, stripped of its earlier bravado, sounded smaller. We mocked him. Right in front of him. Danielle's eyes softened, but her words remained firm. Yes, you did. And now you know why I kept asking you to stop. Another long silence followed, heavy with realization and the slow collapse of long-held assumptions. Finally, Leonard spoke again, his voice unsteady with a humility I had never heard from him before. Danielle, tell Bill we're sorry. No, he corrected himself quickly, not tell him. We need to come and apologize in person. All of us. Evelyn's voice joined, softer now. We underestimated him. We misjudged him completely. Jamal added quietly. I owe him more than an apology. Danielle glanced at me, her eyes asking a silent question. I nodded once. She returned to the phone. You can come this evening. But when you do, come with honesty, not pride. We will, Leonard replied solemnly. That evening, when they arrived, there was no laughter, no superiority, no veiled remarks. Only subdued footsteps, lowered gazes, and words spoken with genuine remorse. Bill, Leonard began, voice thick with humility, we misjudged you. We insulted you. And yet you carried us when we didn't even know we were being carried. Evelyn stepped forward next. We're deeply sorry for every word that diminished what you've done. Jamal followed quietly. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even know who was supporting me. I studied them briefly, not with triumph, but with calm recognition that truth, once revealed, naturally rearranges perception. Finally, I nodded. Apology accepted, I said simply. Later that night, I approved the pending payments. Not as an act of obligation, but as a quiet acknowledgement that humility, once learned sincerely, deserves continuity of grace. If you found this story interesting, please remember to like this video and hit the subscribe button. Also turn on the notification so you don't miss out on any of our amazing videos. And lastly, endeavor to share this video with your friends. Thank you and see you in the next video.